So let's welcome James.
Just gonna move this around. Cool. Thanks. Thanks for being patient about that as well. Yeah, thanks for being here. So today I'm going to talk about why I think UX design has to evolve to stay relevant. I think the first reason for this is that we're all capable of doing more. So whether we're just starting out or whether we've been doing this for a long time, every designer is capable of doing more. And for me, my journey with UX design started 10 years ago. Was fresh out of university, sort of started my first position, had my first sort of real job, let's say. And I sat down with my creative director at the time, and he gave me this project to work on. And I was super excited. It was a restaurant project. I had to just design a website for a restaurant. So I was pumped. I was so excited to get started. I went away. I worked on this design for a couple of days, which was the time that they gave me to do this. Came back, and at the end of those couple of days, we had like a sit down. We were going to do a bit of a critique. So I presented my designs, got a few sort of comments from people in the room, and my creative director at the time just sort of paused for a minute, and he just went, "James, this is pretty shit." And I was like, okay, welcome to UX design, I suppose. And we're going to discuss some of the reasons throughout this talk why my designs initially were probably kind of shit at that period in time. So yeah, 10 years ago, it was around 2008, and user experience wasn't really much of a thing back then. This is the Google Trends graph from that time. I think in the last sort of 5 years, it's rapidly expanded, it's rapidly grown. But back then, my job title was just simply web designer. And yeah, during those 10 years, I started out, I had that job, obviously. I moved through a whole different bunch of contract roles. I worked in a school for a while. And yeah, 3 years ago, I moved to Amsterdam, which is in the Netherlands. It's actually a city that has more bikes than people. And the canals there, so Amsterdam is full of canals, and the canals have around 1 meter worth of like disused bikes at the bottom. So if you go, don't be tempted to jump in and swim. And yeah, I'm a UX designer now at Booking.com. I moved there for that job, and I'd never really thought about like actually getting that job. When I first applied for it, I really didn't think I was going to get it, but I thought, hey, this company wants to fly me to Amsterdam, so I'm going to go and check it out and see. And 3 years later, I'm still there. So is anyone actually aware of Booking.com? Does everyone in the room sort of know it? Yeah. Yeah. We're fairly big, I suppose. And we're kind of famous a little bit for this yellow search box on the homepage. HQ is in Amsterdam, which is why I moved out there. And we've got around 250 designers working there now. Actually, 3 years ago when I moved there, I think I was somewhere around the 50th. So it's grown massively, as I think UX design has grown massively over those years. And yeah, one of the other things we're famous for is that we test everything. But I think that's enough about me and my story, so what do the rest of you do? I really want to find out. So who works for an agency, let's say? Anyone? Just a couple of people. Anyone work on a product? Yeah. Who's still in school, actually? I know this is a university city, so cool. Thanks for sharing that with me. So I'm going to talk about a few things today, which are the reasons why I think that UX design has to evolve a little bit. The first up is that everything is becoming a product. So apps are now products. The phone that the apps are installed on are products. Devices are changing, so we're starting to see things come into play like Amazon Alexa, or the Google Home voice recognition software. And the way that we interface with them is changing too. We've got things such as Amazon Go in Seattle even, which is just a store that you can walk into, pick stuff up off the shelf and walk out, and you don't have to queue, you don't pay. So definitely the way that we're doing things is changing. And technology is evolving too, so things like virtual reality, augmented reality are coming into play, and it's starting to blend into the environment. So as the world grows more comfortable with technologies, UX is obviously going to have to change at the same time too. So this means that we're going to have to start designing less for pixels and more for information. And I have an example of that from Booking for the last 2 years when I was working on this messaging product. Basically, we started out designing a chatbot. Does everyone know what a chatbot is, by the way? Has anyone used one, even? Yeah. So I had the pleasure of being able to work on this, but I initially wasn't sure about taking that project. When it got offered it to me, I kind of stood there for a minute and I was thinking, well, what design work is there to really do on a chatbot? It's kind of some text, maybe some message bubbles, some images. I could do some UX stuff around it, like user journeys, but what else would there be to do? And I was kind of right about the visual design aspect, at least. So we did have message bubbles, we did have images. Those things were sort of finished within the first few weeks. But there was way more to it than that. So whilst working on this project, I had to learn different things that I never thought about at all before that. So I had to learn things like copywriting. I had to learn storytelling. I had to learn conversational design. I had to think about what the user was doing and when and where they would be interacting with this chatbot, and what would give them even a reason to use it. And I learned then also how impactful words can be in design, because through conversational design, you have to start that conversation, you have to figure out where someone is when they're using this, and then say the right things to them to help them move through that process. So in the end, I was happy that I took that project, but I think if I'd have not taken it, I'm not so sure I would have learned these things along the way too. Second of all, I think research and data are starting to become more important than ever. Knowing how to research, knowing when to research, which methods to use, so quantitative or qualitative. And yeah, it's just becoming more and more important. And there was a great example of this within Booking where there was a sort of a group of designers that were working on what we call the partner-facing products. So that's anything that the hotels see, the apartments see, this type of stuff. So not the thing that you're going to see if you're trying to book somewhere to go. But obviously many of these people had never worked in a hotel. They'd never worked in an apartment. So one of the things that they decided to do was actually go and do that. They reached out to some of these places. They said, hey, can I come and work for a day in your hotel and see what it's like to do that job, and then use the tools that we've built to do that job. I actually didn't do that. I'd worked in a hotel previously in a ski season, so I was already somewhat familiar, and I wasn't working on this particular project at the time. But I think that's one great research method. And in fact, some people that owned apartments actually tried renting out their apartments through Booking.com as well to start accepting visitors and seeing what kind of questions they were coming to them with, and also seeing what it was like to use our tools on a day-to-day basis. And it's easy to say, go and do that, but obviously Booking has a fairly big budget for these kind of things. We're allowed to be able to take days off to go and do this type of stuff, but I don't think you have to have a big budget to do research. So one of the things that I did when I was working on the chatbot initially was to take my prototypes, head out into the streets, head out to Starbucks, coffee shops, places like this, and just put this in front of people and start gathering feedback straight away. So the product actually at that point wasn't live. We just did it with literally just prototypes, sometimes even paper prototypes. In fact, one of the designers working at Booking recently was able to invalidate an idea by doing paper sketches and inviting people to come in and see where that would fit, which I thought was really cool. But why is research important anyway? It's important because research helps us to create empathy for our users, basically. And empathy is the ability to understand one another's feelings. So working in the hotel for a day helped those Booking designers understand and empathize with the people that worked there. It helped them develop better products from the end of it. And testing in the street for us helped us get really quick feedback on what was maybe not working and what was working for those people. And the other thing that I spoke about was data. And data is a hot word in the industry, some of it for good, some of it for bad, like we've probably all heard about the Cambridge Analytica scandal through Facebook. But data, when used in the right way, it can be really good. It can help you fill in the gaps that you don't necessarily get from asking why through research. And I wanted to find a cool photo of data. I wish it looked like this. It doesn't. It looks something more like this, which is basically just a data center full of information. But using that data can help you make key product decisions, and using this combined with research can also make a difference. And as I mentioned at booking, we A/B test everything. So one example of that is maybe that I really like this blue button up there, and maybe one of you really likes this red button. And we can spend all day arguing about whose color preference is the best. It's not really going to get us anywhere. So opinions like that don't really matter, and that's where the data comes in, and we test that. And I think anyone should have the ability to do this too. And data can tell us sort of who's clicking one of these buttons the most, but it doesn't tell us why, which is where the research really helps out with that. And I really like this quote from Margaret Stewart. She's the VP of Product Design at Facebook. And she says, data can help you make a good design great, but it will never make a bad design good. And I think if you think about data and research moving forward, this is something to keep in mind. So if you do start using data or you use it already, it's not going to make your design good, but it can help inform the decisions that you make to make a better design. Thirdly, I think designers will need to understand the business value that they provide. And understanding business is kind of a key thing, I think, moving forward. And sometimes I refer to it as commercial awareness, but just being aware of the impacts that you can provide as a designer. So even when that comes down to the job that you're doing with any company, so do you help that company make money or not, or do you help the user? How can you prove that to someone else? And I think the story that I mentioned at the start with the restaurant website design, I didn't really understand any of the things that we've spoken about so far, so I didn't do any user research. I didn't know what kind of person would be looking for a restaurant website, what they would be looking on there. I basically just went away and tried to make something cool to impress someone. And I didn't have commercial awareness, so I didn't even think about the restaurant's goals and all of that. Like, what did they want to get out of this website redesign? So that's something to take forward. Understand your users, basically. And I think one way that you can do that when you're designing is to think, like, how will you know if the thing that you're designing will be successful? And this is kind of one of the questions that we ask a lot at booking. So I think in the past year, I've interviewed maybe 100 designers. And the ones that sort of show a good understanding of business in some way, they don't have to be great business experts, but ones that show a little bit of an understanding about business are the ones that tend to progress. So I think if you can look at a change that you're making to something and figure out why you think that's going to be better, and then talk about that, that's always going to help. And I think you can ask a lot of questions to understand the problem, and that's going to help you basically figure out where that business value is for you. And yeah, I think a good way to do this is to have what I would call like a child's mindset. So go into every situation with a really open mind and just ask as much questions as necessary to find out what information that you need to be able to take that design even further. And does anyone know this website actually? Has anyone seen it before? Yeah? It's Nomad List. And I really like this example. It's created by a guy called Peter Levels. He's a Dutch guy. He started out by making 12 startups in 12 months. And one of the ones that he started, like, I think it was the 4th month in, he hit on Nomad List, which ended up being a really successful idea. And it's his main business now. And this one was so successful because he landed on it, but it solved the problem for users like himself. And it combines a whole bunch of different methods of data and research. So to gather all this information, he was tweeting to people constantly saying, hey, what can you tell me about this city? It's kind of collaborative effort. So he knows what he's looking for to see if something is successful. And this is Peter. His Nomad List makes $50,000 US a month now. His life kind of looks like this. He spends all his time with dogs. It's awesome. But moving on. I think the fourth thing, there's one feature that all the big products have added over the past year, actually. Can anyone guess what that feature was? Stories. Who said stories? Voice was close, but stories is... Yeah, did you see my slides before this? Have you been cheating? Nice answer. So yeah, stories. So Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, WhatsApp, they're all adding stories. People are sharing their stories more than ever. Peter shared his story online. The product features that are stories are so popular because stories are kind of ingrained into humans. in a way that helps us communicate with one another and learn from one another. And we need to start thinking about stories in product terms. And when I say that, I don't mean go add a stories feature to your product, but think more and more about storytelling. So designers must become better storytellers. And I think this is something I also need to work on myself, and I've been trying to work on it a lot. But what story does your sort of product or your brand tell, or whatever it is that you might be doing? And where does that fit into your users' lives? So with the chatbot example that I mentioned earlier, we had to think about where that fit into the user's life when they were booking a travel experience through booking.com. And earlier I mentioned that we're designing less for pixels and more for information, but information is very difficult for people to just understand or take a lot of it in. So storytelling is important because it really helps convey that information in a way that people can actually understand and take it on board. Because people don't actually think in terms of information. They think in stories, they think in other ways. In fact, they think in narratives, so start, middle, end, that type of stuff. So we need to think about those narratives and our part in them. I think Disneyland have been the masters of this for quite a long time. And if you look online, there's all the stuff about Walt Disney being probably the first ever UX designer. But as a child, if you went to Disneyland, originally they would sort of take your name, they would write it on a hat, and you would walk around Disneyland, and then all the characters would greet you by your name. And as a kid, they're probably like, how does he know my name? How does Goofy know my name? All that's digital now. You get a wristband. They have like a ton of data, a ton of information on you. And what Disney do there is they put those children as a character in their own Disney story. So I think something like that really explains the importance of storytelling. If you can make people become a character in the story of your product or your brand, and maybe make is the wrong word, but help them if that's necessary. But I think it's also a great example of how they used that data to tailor an experience for a child. So every child that went to Disney would have a completely different experience. If they liked certain Disney characters, they would come up and greet them. If they didn't like certain Disney characters, they would already know that, so they wouldn't come up. They would maybe they would say hello, but they're not going to be as involved with you because they know they didn't like them. And Peter, who I mentioned before, I think I spoke about it a little bit, but he's a master of storytelling online, basically. Everything he does, he shares it, basically. So he live codes things at times. He tweets everything. He asks for research from his users. He gets those people to collaborate. So Nomad List, as I said, was built through a collaboration from people that lived in those places or who had visited. And because of that, people became invested in the work that he was doing. So the 12 startups in 12 months was a story in itself. That was something that the press were able to take and spread their own story about it, which gave him all that traction to build that business in the end. And stories work so well because they give people an easy way to talk about things, basically. It could be products, could be ideas, could be whatever. And I think ultimately what I'm trying to get at with this is that good user experience isn't just a set of good screens. I see a lot of people just focused on the screen, what they're building now. It goes beyond that. So screens are obviously important. They're a big part of everyone's day-to-day life. We're all using them. There's probably a whole bunch of people on their phone now texting. But think beyond that when you're designing. Like, really think about where does that product or the idea that you're working on now fit into someone's life and when are they going to use it. I think that will help UX evolve past the state that it's in right now. So I think there's a few things to consider from this. I think it's designing pixels is not going to be enough. Things like user journeys, personas, all the other UX practices, they're kind of becoming standard. Things are going to evolve past that. It's going to be design plus something else. And I think the something else is up to everyone else. I don't think it has to be this list and you do all of them. But think about where you can take it. Is there more that you can do? Is that going to be content strategy, conversation design? Are you going to focus more on research as well? And yeah, I think if I could give you some tips for that, it's sort of hook your audience with a compelling story. Peter's 12 startups in 12 months was compelling for people. The story of Disney is compelling for people. At the same time, try and demonstrate business value whilst you're doing that. Find out who your users are, speak to them on their behalf, and really fight for the users because obviously user experience, the clues in the name, users are important. And I think after that, the rest is just the storytelling aspect. And I'm going to leave with my favorite booking value, which is think big, be brave, and fail fast. And when I say fail fast, I don't mean aim to fail, but try and learn quickly so that you can move on and iterate and work through the problem that you're trying to solve. And be brave, sort of what else can you try, the things that you haven't thought about? Can you put yourself in that child's mindset or the child's shoes and be brave and experience something for the first time all over again? And think big, sort of where can you be from 10 years now, from 10 years in the future? So 10 years ago I had no idea about user experience, and now I'm here to try to pass these messages on to people. Where can you be in 10 years from now? Could you be doing the same? How can you evolve as a UX designer yourself? And that's it. So thank you.
Thank you, James. Again, I get to ask the first question, which is earlier I spoke, I think you mentioned you are involved with hiring and booking a little bit as well, so we get to see some incoming designers a bit as well?
Yeah, I mentioned in the last year, I've interviewed probably around 100 designers.
Right. So if you think about back to all the people you've seen, and if you think about all the areas that you presented where we are kind of moving together, then where would you say is the single biggest gap between the people that you see and where you see kind of things should be? Or maybe there is no gap, maybe everybody is perfect already.
So I think I touched on it a little bit, but the biggest thing that we see people not having, I suppose, is that ability to demonstrate the business value. So if they're making a change, can they, I mean, it doesn't have to be right or wrong, but can they explain why they're making that change and what they're looking for to see if it's going to be better than what's there originally? So I think that's a big part of A/B testing anyway. But yeah, if you can sort of explain why you think your design is better in ways that a business can understand, or things, including things like metrics, rather than sort of like I had 10 years ago, where I just went, yeah, I can make a website, a restaurant website, no problem. And then actually I had no idea how to make that website. I made something that I thought looked cool, but it didn't solve any of the problems. So I think the more people can do more in terms of business, the better, actually.
Cool, thank you. Questions from audience to James? There you go.
1, 2, 3. You said, well, you put a big emphasis on storytelling. So yeah. Could you tell me or tell us what's the story of bookings.com design?
What's the story of booking design? That's a good question. So I obviously wasn't there at the start of that. Booking started, I think, in 1996. And I don't think they had any designers at that point. It was mostly just developers working on that product. I think it was something around, I want to say, I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but maybe 10, 12 years ago, sort of around the time where I started in design, where they actually acquired another company that already had designers, and they sort of kick-started the whole design thing at Booking. And then over that time period, it's just grown and grown and grown. So yeah, I think I was around the 50th designer, somewhere around this, when I joined 3 years ago. It's grown rapidly since then. We have I think 260 something now, so 250 was slightly out. And I think design is sort of changing at Booking as well. So obviously 10, 12 years ago, they didn't really care about it that much. They didn't see the value, and that's something that we as designers have had to fight for a little bit and really prove our value to the company and prove what a difference that we can make. So yeah, does that answer your question? You want me to expand on that? Yeah.
That design looks horrible. What's the story behind it?
Yeah, so I would... Thanks. So I think Booking looks the way it does from a lot of that A/B testing. And it's only recently that I think we've tried to introduce things like design systems and really change the way that it looks visually. But it's also hard to argue with a site that makes as much money as Booking does, right? So we can say that we could change the design and make it look better, but does that perform on a business level in the same way? We don't know. But at the scale that we're at, it's very hard to just make a single change like that and flip it to a brand new design. We have to sort of do that iteratively over time. So it's not something that you're going to see happen immediately. And it's also a bit of a side effect, I suppose, of having like 250 people working on a product. There's going to be overlap. There's going to be things that get confused or whatever. It's not on purpose, and we're also testing a lot, so what you see might be different to what I see, for example. But I think at the moment we're really trying to push the visual design element further than we have done previously, which is a nice thing to be a part of. And we don't just have the guest-facing product too, so there's a whole bunch of different products within booking itself.
Okay, anything else? There you go.
Thank you for your presentation. Lisa from Telia Estonia, UX researcher. I have a kind of follow-up question about this storytelling.
Yeah.
You mentioned that storytelling is like a new big thing in UX design, but how do you actually put it in practice in booking? How can you tell stories while you're like selling booking?
So I think the way that I'm not so sure if we've fully put it in practice at booking yet. I think it's something we still need to work on. But I think one of the things that we look at is like what is the user doing and what story are they a part of themselves and where can we help them with that. So if someone's trying to book a specific thing, we become part of their story. So let me collect my thoughts and try and expand on this a little bit. I think, like I said, it's also something that I need to work on myself and get better at. But yeah, I think storytelling can encompass a lot of stuff. So it could be about your brand, it could be the type of ads that you run, it could be how you work on a project, it could be the fact that you're trying to communicate your designs to someone more effectively as well within the business, so not necessarily to anyone external. I think if you can switch the information aspect into a story that someone can understand a little bit better, it helps you become a better communicator overall. And yeah, I think booking actually fits into a lot of people's everyday lives and everyday stories anyway, by helping them hopefully get their dream trip. Obviously it doesn't always work out that way, but we'd like to make sure that that's our goal, that everyone that books through us has like the best experience possible. So that becomes part of the story that they will then share with other people. So I think that's the UX element of it. It's also like blended into marketing, advertising, all this stuff, but it encompasses everything.
So one aspect of storytelling I can think of is, I don't remember if Booking has it, but I remember Airbnb made this change quite a while ago, where like Airbnb started out as a place to also just book an apartment, right? And then they started to think about, maybe we should treat the whole user's journey to the destination as a story. Maybe we should, you're going to a destination, maybe we should tell you a little bit about the destination also, find some local guides. I don't remember, does Booking have anything like that?
Yeah, we have a guides product. I don't think we have local guides like Airbnb, but we do have guides for specific destinations. And yeah, you're right, it's trying to look at that entire user journey and piece together all the different parts of that.
Okay, more questions from the audience? Quite a few.
Hi,
Hello.
Silver from Playtech, product manager. You obviously have different types of customers. You have the regular persons looking for accommodation, the companies offering accommodation. I don't know, maybe something else. How much effort you put in for the flows for the product used by the regular customer compared to all the products that are in the background that the regular user does not see? Do you make any difference, or you try to be best everywhere?
There's not much of a difference, I would say. We have teams focused on all of those areas. Some areas have more teams focused on them just because of the way it's set up or what the business is trying to achieve. But yeah, we have actually, I think, very similar amounts of people working on like the hotel, the partner product side of things as we do the guest-facing side of things. So that whole experience matters to us. If we don't provide the hotels or the apartments or etc. with a good experience, or they want to carry on using a product, in which case, if they don't, then we're losing potential customers that would maybe have wanted to stay in that particular place, and vice versa. So yeah, it's really a mixed bag. Obviously with 250 plus designers, we've got a lot of people working on all these different areas.
All right, we have time for one last question to James.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. I'm Jüri Muhin from Ixd.ma, Estonian design community. And I just wanted to ask interesting question. I always felt that this booking is quite aggressively like selling me something, like all these labels like high demand and you will lose this offer in 1 second and 20 people already viewed this and so on and so on. And it didn't make me feel good because I know this information is also not correct or that's
No,
my question. Is it really a real data or it's just blunt marketing?
It's always real data. So what you see is real.
Okay.
I think every one of us designers in the company would like rage quit if it was not real, or at least we would be pretty unhappy about that, let's say. So everything that you do see there is real. I understand for some people it may feel that way. For other people it actually helps them to get the place that they want to get. So it's hard to say with that. Like, I obviously have my own personal opinions on it. Booking have their reasons for doing it. So yeah, I'm gonna back away from that question a little bit, I think.
Okay.
All right, and with that, time's up. So thank you, James, and thank you, Sergey, again.